is my explanation of what I did, how I did it, and why I did it so clear that you understand this property as deeply as I understand the property?
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
Welcome to the program, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out with my good friend, Tim Andersen. Tim, welcome back to the program, my friend, the Appraiser's Advocate. Appreciate you being here.
Dustin, thank you. If only your audience could hear what we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes. Thank you.
Well, they can't, because we're going to edit that part out. I do want the listeners to know that we're sponsored by a couple of great programs. Of course, a la mode being one of them. A la mode is where I do my appraisal work. It's the software that I use because it makes me more efficient and allows me to do a better job. Check them out by going to alamode.com, or you can call them at 800-ALAMODE. And of course, we're sponsored by OREP. OREP is my E&O of choice. It should be yours as well. OREP.org. That's OREP.org. All right, Tim, you are the appraiser's advocate. You help appraisers to defend themselves against state board investigations, among other things. You also help appraisers get prepared, meaning let's use some prevention rather than defense. And talk to us a little bit about the services that you provide before we get into a couple of questions from our listeners.
Dustin, thank you. Give me a shout, and I will help you with questions. For example, you say, help me out with excess or surplus land. Okay, we can do that. Mm-hmm. It's a whole lot easier to get in touch with me beforehand and get that cleared up than it is after the state or Fannie Mae or whoever makes a complaint about it. Okay. So yeah, that's what I do. Or get in touch with me saying, here's some reports. Here are a couple of my reports. Go through them and tell me if I'm doing everything it is I'm supposed to be doing. And yeah, I do that too. I'll be happy to.
Shameless plug time. I mean, you said get a hold of me, but how do they get in touch with you?
Dustin, Tim at theappraisersadvocate.com.
Love it. One of the things we do here, Tim, of course, is what we call Ask the USPAP Expert. These are questions that come from our listeners or from various sources, and we typically answer these individuals pretty quickly when they send the question. In other words, you don't have to wait for this episode to come out, but we usually find that these are interesting enough that if one person in the class has the question, maybe others that are listening have the same question. So with their permission, using their first names only, we will ask these questions on the air and have the expert, which is not me, by the way, the other individual on the program today, answer these questions. So let's start out with, I think, is probably an easy one from Paul. Tim, here's the question from Paul. He says, imagine you've gone through the proper USPAP disclosure process, dotting all your I's, crossing all your T's. Now here's the deal, he says. Would it be considered a violation of USPAP if you omit the number of times you've permitted a particular performed a particular service from your prior service statement?
Okay, let's narrow this down a little bit. Remember, we're looking at a 3-year period. Okay, Before the 3 years, no, it doesn't make any difference. Okay, but within the 3-year period, you don't have to list everything specifically you've done. You just have to disclose that within the previous 3-year period, you have provided services on that particular property. That could be appraisal services, brokerage services, leasing services, window washing services, singing at a bar mitzvah, whatever. It's the services to that property within the last 3 years. Outside of the last 3 years, no, don't worry about it.
I know, just to clarify, Tim, I know, because you and I know each other really well, and I know that you sometimes say things a little tongue in cheek, and sometimes people don't get that. I just want to make sure that if you've mowed the lawn on that place, does USPAP require that I disclose that?
Okay, that is providing a service to the property. Now you say, wait a minute, I was a junior in high school and I was working for a lawn mowing company. Do I have to disclose that? Okay, since you were not a principal of the corporation, you were just doing your job. My my personal response, the response from Tim would be no, you don't.
Okay.
But my response as a USPAP instructor, knowing how tightly some states are willing to interpret USPAP, I would say yes. So
Okay.
that there is no issue with the fact that when you were 17 years old, you pushed a lawnmower across the front lawn. But again, the Tim answer is no, but the USPAP instructor answer is yeah.
In other words, it's better to go over the top and reveal too much than not enough.
In this particular instance, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the question, Tim, is does it matter the number of time? In other words, is it enough to say, let's say you've done two, and let's just be realistic, you've done two appraisals. One was a drive-by, one was a private service for a divorce, and now you're doing it for Fannie Mae, via a lender. And so in the previous, we'll just go 36 months, right? In the previous 3 years, you've done two different services. Do you have to say, I've done two different services, or can you just say, I've performed services?
I've performed services.
Okay.
Again, you want to detail them? Okay, detail them. But the issue here is the disclosure of the provision of services, not the disclosure of the number of times you provided those services. You're making it clear that maybe you're a whole lot more familiar with the property than you would be if you were just appraising. Let's face it, if you were on a you worked for a cleaning contractor, you're going to get back into the nooks and crannies.
Right. Oh, good point. Yeah, I see what you're, and
You may
that
know,
makes sense why you're revealing all services, because
yeah,
you may know something as a different service provider than you would know as an appraiser.
right. And when you walk in there as an appraiser, you're going to know what's in the nooks and crannies because you've been back there with a vacuum and a dust mop.
Very good. Mr. Tim Andersen is with us. He is the appraiser's advocate. When we get back, Tim, we've got another question from another Tim, by the way, asked us a great question that I can't wait to delve into. First, we want to pause and remind you that we're sponsored by a couple great companies, of course. OREP Insurance, folks. I mean, I've been with many other companies throughout my 27 plus years as an appraiser, and they're great companies, right? I mean, it's pretty hard to not be a good company, but if you want the best, check out OREP. And here's why, folks. Go to their website, orep.org, and just click on the tab that says the word benefits, and just spend 2 minutes perusing the benefits that you're going to get with OREP that, let's be honest, you're not going to get anywhere else. The free education, and at least one of those is taught by my good friend, Mr. Tim Andersen. So if you love what he's saying here today, you're going to want to take his class on the OREP website, and you can only do so if you are an OREP member. Check him out by going to orep.org. Again, it's OREP.org. A la mode, folks. I've been with them forever. I've looked at other software. I've even used some of the other software out there. And again, it's great software. I know the CEOs of many of these software providers. They're great people providing a great product. If you want the best, if you want the most value, you're going to go with a la mode. Don't believe me? Pick up the phone and call them. Call a la mode. Yes, I know it's like calling the Ford dealer and saying, should I buy a Chevy? But I'll tell you this. A la mode salespeople know their software and they know their competitor software. If you are with any other company, have that conversation. How is your software different than the one that I'm currently using? That's the question you should ask them. Again, it's 800 a la mode, or you can go to their website at alamode.com. And welcome back to the program, Mr. Tim Andersen. I sure appreciate you taking time out. You're a busy guy, and you are always so kind with your time and being on this program. Thank you, friend.
Oh, sure, Dustin. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
We, of course, are doing the Dear USPAP Instructor episode today, where we take questions from the audience. And here is one from another Tim. We're going to keep his last name anonymous, but first name Tim. He says, I have a question for your guest, Tim Andersen. Forgive me if this does not come across the way it's intended, but here goes. How detailed does my report need to be? What I mean is, no report is perfect. You've said that many times. So, what is too little? What is too much? What is just right using the Goldilocks analogy? Tim, what say you?
Okay, Tim, thank you for your question. Unfortunately, Tim, there is not an answer. There is merely your answer, and it is going to change with every appraisal assignment that you receive. Some assignments are extremely straightforward. Other assignments are extremely complex. And if you've got a very straightforward assignment, you may be in and out of it in 3 hours. All right. If you're doing a 25,000 square foot custom built house on 500 acres in northern Idaho, you may be in that for a couple of weeks to get it done properly. And you may be looking at comps in 3 states to get it done properly.
Right.
So the here is a model, a very rough model that you might use. You need to give your appraisal to somebody else, your appraisal report to somebody else, and say, all right, read through this. Does it make sense? Now you say, well, wait a minute, am I giving up confidentiality? In the purest sense, yes, you are, but not in a sense that is really going to get you in any trouble with the state or with your client. Okay. So you ask that person, and ideally it should be another appraiser. Is my explanation of what I did, how I did it, and why I did it so clear that you understand this property as deeply as I understand the property? And if they say, oh, yeah, all right, it's clear. Yeah, no problem. It makes sense to me. Then you're home free. But if they sit down and say, okay, I got a whole bunch of questions. No, it isn't done. You have got to take those questions and rewrite the appraisal to the point where those questions don't exist anymore. And again, I can't tell you at what point that is because that point does not exist. That line does not exist. It exists separately, uniquely, and individually for each appraisal assignment that you have. Some are going to be simple. Some are going to absolutely wear you out. And look at me, gray hair. You know, you're going to look like I do at the end of your career. Okay. So I wish there were an answer. I wish I could say, oh, yeah, once you put in 7.32 hours, you're done. You've got everything done. That may be too much. It may be way too little.
Yeah.
But that's why we design a scope of work so that when we sit down and look at it, we say, this one is going to take some time and this one's going to take some research. And, you know, I may have to get a hold of Dustin because I don't do a lot of work in northern Idaho. Dustin does. And I may have to buy data from Dustin. Okay. That's part of the scope of work. That's part of being competent. And that's becoming more and more of an issue. And being, and I'm going to use the word incompetent, but in its least derogatory sense.
Okay.
Being incompetent is not a matter of being a drooling idiot. Being incompetent is simply a matter of not knowing what it is you're supposed to do in any given appraisal assignment. And you can be a wonderful house appraiser, but not no doodly squat about appraising fourplexes. Therefore, you probably shouldn't. Or you should bring in help so that there is not an issue. And Tim, back to your question, the narrative, the language that we use should be clear. In other words, it should be like you're talking to a fairly intelligent 10-year-old. If a fairly intelligent 10-year-old can understand what you did, how you did it, and why you did it, you're home free. And you say, how do I do that? Real simple. You run it through ChatGPT. You run it through Grammarly. You run it through any number.
You give it to your 10-year-old.
Yeah, run it past your 10-year-old. Yes. You have one. It's been a long time since we had a 10-year-old in our house.
Very true. Very true.
You run it through services like that. And then that's how, and then Tim, honestly, if it doesn't, if there is something in your report that doesn't at least indirectly affect exposure time, highest and best use, marketability, and market value, why is it in your report? It's that simple.
Well, so
Okay, now
Tim,
you say, well, the state says I have to include certain things. Okay, well, you got to include those. And well, my client wants me to say this. Well, see, now you're getting into the definition of an appraiser that says the appraiser is independent. Well, if every time your client says do something, you go, okay, that raises questions of independence, which raises questions of competence, which raises questions of ethics.
Sure.
And Dustin and I had this discussion some time ago. Choosing to be ethical or not ethical is just that, a choice. And when you don't know what it is you're supposed to do to complete an assignment competently, that's a choice. Because you can pick up the phone and call somebody. Hey, Tim, how do I do this? Hey, Dustin, how do I do this? So states look very carefully at the choices you've made. And if it believes that the choices you've made are poor relative to what you should have done versus what you did, the state may very well expand the charge to include the violation of the ethics rule. And when the state does that, things jump ugly real fast.
So I know a little bit about this situation, Tim, and the truth of the matter is I actually prompted Tim to write this question to you because I thought it was an excellent question we had in a coaching situation. And I'll just give you a little bit more background just to kind of dive in it. And not that we need to go too deep down the rabbit hole, but I think it's important, the context of this question. We were talking about support for adjustment specifically. In fact, we were talking about Synapse, which is a sponsor of my minisodes. And the fact that Synapse will give you all kinds of charts and graphs, and it will show you this and show you that. And his question was, how much of that should I include in the appraisal report versus how much of that should I include in my work file? And I had an opinion, but I thought that your opinion would probably be better. And this stemmed the question, how detailed does the report need to be? We all know that the work file needs to be detailed enough that you can recreate the report. His question is, how much of that should I include in the report versus how much of that do I put in my work file?
Okay, I don't mean to be snotty, Dustin, but when it comes to
Please
charts, okay, I'll be snotty. When it comes to charts and graphs, if you can't explain them to 12 people too dumb to get out of jury duty, don't include them in your report.
Okay. So, okay. I think I'm
way too easy. It's way too easy to get out of jury duty. When you're sitting there in voir dire and the judge says, can you be impartial? You go, no. And the judge says, thank you. Why? And you're gone. It's
I got it. Okay. I'm following.
Right. So, and the problem with charts and graphs, and I'm not dumping on Synapse, please don't.
Well, no. And it's more than just charts and graphs. It's how much, how much detail do you go into where your work file might, be enough if somebody goes that deep. If they want to know where that $62 a square foot came from, you've got the support.
Here's the thing. Pretend, Dustin, you're on the stand and I'm the other side's attorney. Okay. Now, you've sworn to tell the truth. Okay.
Sure.
And you've got some lovely charts, some lovely scatter plots. Specifically, let's go with scatter plots in your report. And I say, Dustin, you have a bunch of scatter plots in your report. Is that correct?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, okay. See, now we've just established that this isn't my interpretation. It's yours. Okay. Yeah, all right. There are a bunch of scatter plots. Now, these scatter plots are supposed to describe to us the local market. Is that correct?
I would answer yes.
Okay. Now, Dustin, would you tell us, are these scatter plots homoscedastic or heteroscedastic?
All right. This is where I get out ChatGPT on the stand and look up those two words, right?
Okay. You don't know. Now, the thing is, they're both very simple concepts. But because we don't study statistics, and because therefore we don't understand their capacities and their limitations, we have to be very careful.
Sure.
So if you're going to include charts, include them, but then make sure, number one, you understand what they are and where they came from. That's basic competency. And number two, you can explain them to 12 people too dumb to get out of jury duty.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Tim is always very articulate, very funny, and very intelligent. Thank you for joining me today for questions that are always above my head, but you handled them with ease. Mr. Tim Andersen, one more time, how do people get a hold of you if they would like your assistance?
Tim at theappraisersadvocate.com.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.